Justice and plain reasonableness would demand that in light of his willful fraud as a student, the Reverend and the Doctor should be removed from the King's name.
As if a demolition team set off when you see the old demolitions of these old buildings.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown up.
Anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under-infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
The way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
The building collapsed to dust. You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big.
What happened to the concrete was pulverized from river to river. There was dust powder 2-3 inches thick. The concrete was just pulverized.
For those who are unfamiliar, in 2007, a man named Peter Joseph released a film called Zeitgeist. This film received millions of views on the internet and became very popular. Then in 2008, Zeitgeist Addendum, the sequel, came out. From there, Peter Joseph established the Zeitgeist Movement.
Whether Zeitgeist was a film that was intended by Peter Joseph or whoever was behind it to be what it ended up being, I don't know. But I can say that the message that's being expressed by Zeitgeist is without a doubt the most clear depiction of the mystery school ideology, and it's done in such a way to be, it's kind of what I've described as a sort of mystery schools for dummies. It's a way to get people that normally wouldn't be setting foot to any various secret societies. It's a way to indoctrinate them and get them to believe in the same sort of elitist mindset without having to go through any particular initiation. It's also usually accompanied with the idea of pride, that is that the people believe that what they believe is only for a select few, and that sort of has this way of sticking with them, and that nobody believes what I believe, and so it's sort of this elitist mindset that comes with that as well.
The first Zeitgeist film was divided into 3 sections. The second section was about 9/11 being an inside job. The third section was about the corruption of the Federal Reserve. I have no real issue with the last 2 sections, but since the release of the first Zeitgeist film, Peter Joseph, the creator, has distanced himself from the 9/11 issue altogether. This makes me wonder if the only reason he spoke about 9/11 in the first film was to get the 9/11 Truth Movement on board with his agenda.
He is not a legitimate reverend. He is not a bona fide PhD, and his name isn't really Martin Luther King Jr. What's left?
So, my name, Peter Joseph, at what point does my identity become absolutely transparent? Should I give people my social security number? Should I give them my tax return? Those that have something against me for the things that I talk about want to find anything they can to try and to make me look like I'm hiding something or I have ulterior motives, and I expect that. But, whatever. It doesn't mean anything to me. I go by Peter Joseph. People can call me whatever the hell they want to call me. I'm constantly interacting, putting myself out there. I have nothing to hide. And even if someone finds out my real identity, where I live, who my parents are, who everyone in my friends are, it's not going to change a damn thing. The unfortunate reality is that I am given a controversial title, and people do have a lot of problems with me of a more traditional-minded upbringing, and I don't like to see other people suffer because of what I do. But most of my friends and family are very much aware, and they accept this, so this is something that I just deal with.
On Labor Day, 1957, a special meeting was organized by Martin Luther King and 4 others at a strange institution called the Highlander Folk School in Monteagle, Tennessee. The Highlander Folk School was a communist front, having been founded by Miles Horton, Communist Party organizer for Tennessee, and Don West, organizer for North Carolina. The leaders of this meeting with King were the aforementioned Horton and West, along with Abner Berry and James Dombrowski, all open and acknowledged members or officers of the Communist Party USA. The agenda of the meeting was a plan to tour the southern states to initiate demonstrations and riots. From 1955 to 1960, Martin Luther King's associate advisor and secretary was one Bayard Rustin. In 1936, Rustin joined the Young Communist League at New York City College. Convicted of draft dodging, he went to prison for 2 years in 1944. On January 23, 1953, the Los Angeles Times reported his conviction and sentencing to jail for 60 days for lewd vagrancy and homosexual perversion. Rustin attended the 16th Convention of the Communist Party USA in February 1957. 1 month later, he and King founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC for short. The president of the SCLC was Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The vice president of the SCLC was the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, who is also president of an identified communist front known as the Southern Conference Educational Fund, an organization whose field director, a Mr. Karl Braden, was simultaneously a national sponsor of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, of which you may have heard. The program director for the SCLC was the Reverend Andrew Young, in more recent years, Jimmy Carter's ambassador to the UN and mayor of Atlanta. Young, by the way, was trained at the Highlander Folk School, previously mentioned. Soon after returning from a trip to Moscow in 1958, Bayard Rustin organized the first of King's famous marches on Washington. The official organ of the Communist Party, the Worker, openly declared the march to be a communist project. Although he left King's employ as secretary in 1961, Rustin was called upon by King to be second in command of the much larger March on Washington, which took place on August 28, 1964. Bayard Rustin's replacement in 1961 as secretary and advisor to King was Jack Odell, also known as Hunter Pitts Odell. According to official records, in 1962, Jack Odell was a member of the National Committee of the Communist Party USA. He had been listed as a Communist Party member as early as 1956. Odell was also given the job of acting executive director for SCLC activities for the entire Southeast, according to the St. Louis Globe-Democrat of October 26, 1962. At that time, there were still some patriots in the press corps, and word of Odell's party membership became known. What did King do? Shortly after the negative news reports, King fired Odell with much fanfare. And he then, without the fanfare, immediately hired him again as director of the New York office of the SCLC, as confirmed by the Richmond News Leader of September 27, 1963. In 1963, a black man from Monroe, North Carolina, named Robert Williams, showed up in Peking, China. Exactly 20 days before King's 1964 March on Washington, Williams successfully urged Mao Zedong to speak out on behalf of King's movement. Mr. Williams was also at the same time maintaining his primary residence in Cuba, from which he made regular broadcasts to the southern U.S. 3 times a week from high-power AM transmitters in Havana under the title Radio Free Dixie. In these broadcasts, he urged violent attacks by blacks against white Americans. During this period, Williams wrote a book entitled Negroes with Guns. The writer of the foreword for this book? None other than Martin Luther King, Jr.
If you think about Manson or Jim Jones, they were both very sensitive about nuclear weapons. Jim Jones, as you know, changed the locale of his church, his group, a couple of times, largely because he thought that the new locale would be safer.